What is the story of an unresolved mystery in your life? I was a young kid and my dad got me those cool 2-mile walkies so we could talk whenever he drove near enough while working, go to my grandma's for Christmas and play with them. She has a huge patch of woods far behind her house and a big tree in the back. Come night, I'm in the back by myself thinking some kid crap like what flavor of Jello Batman likes the most kind of crap when my walkie-talkie goes off. Crap, didn't know I left it on. Basically what followed was somebody told me exactly what I looked like and what I was wearing. They said they were in the woods. I wish I could describe how it seemed like those woods walked towards me when it hit me. Sinking terror. I couldn't get far enough away. Parents got involved. They thought it was my uncle playing a prank but we found out he was long gone. The mystery part isn't the man in the woods. Rather the fact he told me to look in the tree next to me. There was a freaking noose tied in it. It had definitely not been there earlier in the day, or we would have seen it instantly. Like, the window of time to be able to climb that tree and hang a noose with no one noticing was slim to none. I have no answers from this situation, only a sense of dread and a few nightmares. I am so glad I am reading this during the day, at work, with my co-worker shooting out hot farts next to me. My dad. He never speaks about his past. I have never met any of his family. He used a fake name when I was young, and his supposed real name was discovered to be deceased a few years ago. He can't get social security or retirement because we don't know who the frick he really is. Not even my mom knows anything. He is alive and well, and a very good person, so I really don't know what he could be running from. My girlfriend's uncle has no legal identity. Her grandmother is kinda weird. She never sent him to school, never took him to see a doctor. He's never even had a job. His whole life consists of nothing but TV and video games. I've never even met the guy because every time we visit her grandmother he hides in his room. He doesn't like strangers. Freaking weird. When I was 11 I wasn't the tallest kid, not much more than 135 cm/4 feet 5. When on a vacation in Germany I used to go to this pool that was deeper than my height. I could not swim at the time but I was hanging out in the big and warm section that was slightly deeper than my height. I managed to not drown by holding my breath, going underwater and jumping from the bottom to catch my breath. But on time it didn't go as planned and I started drowning. It was seconds but to me it felt like long minutes. I thought I was going to die. Then I felt someone grabbing me by my arm and lifting me out of the water in one motion. I was choking and had water in my eyes. It took me around 10 seconds to be able to see again but there was no one around me. I asked a lady that was sitting in the pool just in front of me when I was drowning but she was not even aware I was drowning and didn't see anyone getting me out of the pool. I quickly went to the lifeguard booth and he was sitting there minding his own business. He was too far to be the one that got me out of water. To this day I have no idea who saved me. 2 days later there was a camera overseeing the pool that I had nearly drowned in. Alright, there is one event that happened to me in high school that I've always wondered about. There was a month or so where my sleep paralysis was happening almost every night. In these paralysis episodes they mostly consisted of me seeing a dark figure walking around my room, coming by my bed and staring at me. Similar things like this. Well, I wake up one morning to my dad asking me if I had woken up in the middle of the night to use the restroom or anything like that. I inform him that I did not. He goes on to tell me that he heard footsteps in my room. My room was upstairs that night so he comes up to see what's going on. In my closet there is a door that leads to the attic, which at this time he found open, which is odd since there is usually a lock on it. After he told me this we kind of just shrugged it off as an odd occurrence. Later on that same week I find a question mark written into the dust of a mirror that sits against my wall, which I am more than 100% sure had not been there before that day, and it had been dusty for a while so it's not like someone did that a month ago or whenever. Just a bunch of odd events that happened in a short amount of time that I've always wondered about. Don't understand why your dad didn't check out the attic. When I was like 4 or 5, my brother and I were sitting on the floor with my grandma playing with my mom's old Barbies. My grandma got up to go make dinner, but she wanted to put the box of dolls away first because they all had tiny accessories and she didn't want my baby brother to choke on them. I watched her put the box on the top shelf of the closet behind me before walking to the kitchen. I found something else to do and was playing quietly by myself. My back was turned to both my brother and the closet. When my grandma came in to check on us a few minutes later, her face flashed with surprise. She asked me angrily why I had taken the box down after she put it away. I had no clue what she was talking about until I turned around and saw my brother playing with a Barbie, the box sitting neatly in front of him. To this day, no one in my family has any idea how my brother got that box. My grandma assumed I was lying when I told her I didn't do it, but both my brother and I were way too small to reach the top shelf of the closet. It's probably one of the clearest, yet most frustrating memories I have. Spider baby confirmed. My friend got this carved stone egg from his dad that he picked up somewhere in Africa. It had a fish on one side and a rooster on the other, with some art in between. One day, I was playing with it randomly and discovered it had the following properties. If you spun the egg counterclockwise, it would always stop with the fish side up. If you spun it clockwise, it would always stop with the rooster side up. It would never stop with an art pattern facing up. When I say always, I mean always. It was super weird. We were just yelling all day in his room every time we did a test spin when we first found out. Then we started gaming kids at school for cash. Kids would never pay attention to which way it spun. After a month of this, it was tough finding suckers. Then one day, this kid got mad he lost and threw the egg. It shattered to bits, and that was the end of that. Never found out what sorcery was behind that dang egg. My father got drunk once and let slip he had a child with a woman. He was married, so the woman took their son and raised him in Germany, her homeland. I thought it was common knowledge in his side of the family, so I mentioned it once, but then my casual announcement was greeted with shock and tears. My dad was always a philandering liar, but apparently he kept the child a secret. I can't remember the kid's name. I wrote it down in one of my many diaries. He'd be a middle-aged man now. My father has dementia, so I can't get the name from him. TLDR. I have a mixed-race German brother I will never meet. Hello mein Bruder. My mother always tells me the story when she was growing up and how she really wanted this doll for Christmas. My grandpa recently had lost his job and money was very tight and the doll was pretty expensive. She wrote a letter to Santa talking about her family, how good she had been, and about her dad losing his job. Well, one day before Christmas, the mailman comes to the door with a box and a letter from Santa. My grandparents had bought my mother the doll and it was sitting in the basement, so they were surprised to see one delivered to the house. To this day, my grandparents and my mother have no idea who bought the doll for her. She said it was the greatest Christmas gift she had ever received and really shows the true meaning of Christmas. I used to work at the post office. Letters to Santa are actually read by postal workers. They have a fund set up to purchase toys for kids in need, then deliver them before Christmas sent from Santa. One evening back in the 80s, my mom was getting ready to watch a scary movie back while my dad was away on a military training trip. It was one of the first nights she had ever spent on her own. She moved from her father's house to a sorority house at her husband's house, so she made sure to lock up and check on every window, door, nook, and cranny in the house before she put the movie on. There was not a single way in or out of that house that hadn't been closed up. Halfway through the movie, she heard a noise coming from the kitchen, so she gingerly tiptoed around the corner to find a black and white cat sitting in the middle of the room staring at her. They didn't have any animals. My mom named her Devil Kitty and she was the first cat I ever had. My parents' house is not the most secure, but they were pretty good about locking doors and windows. And yet the cats still found ways in and out. Cats are ninjas. When I was an early teenager, I got involved with big brothers, big sisters. My big brother was a guy named Chris who, like me, was a little odd, and so we got along really well and hung out a lot. When we had been paired for about a year, he told me that he was going on a trip to Baltimore and told me the date that he would be back. I waited for a few days after that day to call him, but when I did, the person on the other line said, "There's no Chris here." I looked in the phone book to make sure I dialed correctly, and I know for a fact that I did because I had the number circled and it matched the number I had dialed. But the man repeated, "We've been here for a long time, and there's never been a Chris here." Chris never returned from Baltimore, and neither I nor big brothers, big sisters ever heard from him again. Sometime when I was around 7 years old, my dad left for Guatemala because he was going back to live there, which made me sad. 2 summers later, I asked my mother if I could go visit him over there for his 30th birthday surprise. She planned for me to be there for about a week. Upon arrival, I don't see my dad anywhere at the airport. In fact, I didn't see him the whole ride to his place, in which the relatives kept. My uncle, 2 aunts, and grandmother kept stating that he was waiting at the house. When we got there, he wasn't at the house either, and they made another reason such as he's out practicing soccer with his friends. In fact, the entire week that I was there I didn't see my dad at all, because they kept making excuses. I was so sad when I had to leave because I didn't get to see him once. And when returning to America I told my mom how I didn't see my dad once when I was there. She called my dad, and he said that he wasn't expecting me, since it was a surprise, but he was at his house the entire time so I should have seen him. He went on to say that he lives only with his dog Barlow, and that's what frightened me. The thing was that I saw a tombstone when I was there with nothing written on it, and when I asked the relatives what it was supposed to be they said your dad's dog Barlow. He died a few months ago. When my mom tried contacting the relatives I stayed with, they never picked up, so she told my dad to do so. However, he said that his relatives haven't lived with him since before he came to America for a while. Since then, I have been wondering what happened because the people I stayed with won't respond to anyone. Sometimes I wonder if they were even my relatives. I'll preface this story with the fact that I've been a Braves fan since I was a kid. So I'm in college in the mid 2000s and I have a group of friends I watch Braves games with. This particular season the Braves had a closer by the name of Bob Wickman. He was a journeyman type player, kind of a big guy near the end of his career. We loved him. To be funny, I even made his picture my profile picture on Facebook. A few weeks go by and I get an envelope in my campus mail and it is a signed Bob Wickman baseball card from his younger days when he played for the Yankees. The envelope was from a cards and collectibles type company and had nothing in it but the card. I asked everybody I knew if they had sent me the card. Nobody would ever admit to it. I still to this day have the card and have no idea who sent it to me. I still think about it sometimes. So, thank you, mystery person, and Bob Wickman. Maybe someone had a crush on you and was shy enough to not say a thing. When I was in high school, my family lived in the Philippines. When school ended in summer, we would always leave for summer vacation to either some other country or back home to the States. When I got back to the Philippines after summer vacation, ready to start my senior year, our maid, everyone there had maids, told me that a guy had shown up at our house the day after we left with roses for me. Apparently he had been planning this huge romantic gesture. She told him we were gone for the summer and he left, taking the flowers and any card or anything with him. I tried figuring out who it was at school, and either no one knew, or the people who knew kept quiet. I never found out who it was, and it's bugged me for 20 years. Hey, this is nice. Some stories are better like this. It is beautiful and mysterious. My brother is about 2 years older than me. My parents and our eldest brother distinctly remember him telling a lot of stories when he was little about his past life. One in particular that I remember was about his grandpa and his dog who lived in a house that caught on fire and both died, at one point unprovoked. Months later, I remember him pointing out a burnt down shack and saying that was his grandpa's house. Come to find out that an elderly man and his dog died in that fire, but it wasn't anyone we knew nor were related to. My brother was less than 10 years old when these stories happened, and this was way before our internet days and we never read the newspaper or watched the news. Too caught up in sports and cartoons. If you ask him about any of this now, he says he doesn't remember. Hope his story is in fact the truth, which would mean we get to live more. When I was about 7 years old, this was around 2002, my dad just never came home. He went to work and just refused to come back home and work out his marriage with my mother. It was a really stressful time in our lives, and I remember my mom and I calling him every day asking why he wouldn't come back. Well, one night we got an anonymous phone call to our house. My mother told me that a man called her. I guess he had 69 at it because the number read as unavailable, and told her something along the lines of, "You don't know who I am, but your husband is having an affair and everyone at work knows." It did lead to my mom freaking the frick out, but I'm honestly really thankful that that person called and let her know. She's loyal to a fault, and I know that she wouldn't have been able to pick up our stuff and leave if there was any chance of saving her marriage. I still don't know who called that day though, or if my father knows the guy. I think I'd like to know one day, but I'm okay not knowing either. It was probably the guy he was having the affair with. Not me, but my best friend. He, his boyfriend, and a third roommate were all living in a new apartment together. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was so new they were the only tenants to live in that unit to date. The third roommate was a pretty quiet guy, stayed in his room, door closed at all times, sort of a slob. Anyway, one day Marty and Martin, yes they are a couple and both are named Martin, come home and see that their roommate's door is open, which never happens. They go and peer in and see a perfectly folded uniform. Unusual for the messy roommate to fold anything. For a nearby banquet hall, I forget the name of it, laying on his bed. The sort of place that could be rented to host events, wedding receptions and the like. The thing is, their roommate doesn't work there. None of them do, and they don't know anyone that does. Yet here is this uniform sitting on his bed. They questioned him and he seemed as baffled as they did. Fast forward a month or two and one day Marty comes home. House is completely empty, and he goes to the bathroom. In the middle of the bathroom floor is a lacy woman's garter belt, the type worn on a wedding day. This is again strange because of the 3 men in the apartment, 2 were gay and the other had no female contact and hardly even had any male friends. He played a lot of video games. Not that that's a bad thing, he just wasn't social. While both are unexplained, I think the strangest part is there is actually a link between both clothing items. One from a banquet hall that hosts wedding receptions, and then a garter belt worn on a wedding day. I'm a pretty skeptical person, so when they told me all of this I tried to come up with every alternative solution I could imagine, and they had really good responses that shut all of them down, as they too had tried to come up with an explanation and couldn't. Still have no idea what happened. Also, one time Marty said 2 sriracha bottles went missing when he was spending the summer there alone. I know a couple that go by Chris and Tina. They're lesbians, both named Christina. Married now, so I'm sure that causes some confusion. This was around 2006, when I was 10 years old. It was after midnight. I was sleeping in one of my aunt's bed while my brother slept in another's, adjacent to mine. Across from us was our grandparents' bedroom, and downstairs, next to the laundry room, was my parents' bedroom. I woke up, groggy and confused and needing to pee very badly, and suddenly I heard a voice. With 8 people in the house, that wasn't uncommon. Someone had probably gotten up to go to the washroom and either started talking to someone else or they had answered the phone. Mind you, I was still half asleep, so to me a phone call after midnight seemed totally reasonable. Well, it turns out that couldn't have been possible because I didn't recognize the voice. That was what immediately woke me up, and I froze, clutching my blanket while sitting up in bed. It was a man. His voice wasn't deep, not like my dad or grandfather's, and he kept prattling on about some treasure. He was right outside the door, but he never turned the doorknob or made any attempt at entering one of the rooms. He just kept passing by, as if pacing, all the while talking to himself about a treasure. I was terrified and looked over to my aunt, who was sound asleep. I still don't know how I managed to not wet the bed. Eventually the voice went silent, and I somehow fell asleep. The next morning, everyone is doing their thing, getting ready for work or school or busy in the kitchen, so I assumed it was just a dream. I really wish I'd kept my mouth shut. As I'm eating breakfast, I told my mom and grandmother, who were both in the kitchen, about the voice, and laughed at how weird the brain is. They froze. Everyone froze. It turns out the voice was real. I hadn't mentioned his obsession with a treasure, but my grandfather did, as did my mother and brother. Everyone agreed about the treasure. Apparently, he combed the entire house, but he never actually entered any of the rooms. Nothing was stolen. All the doors were locked, and all the windows had screens, none of which were missing. 2 weeks later, while I was helping my grandparents clean the garage, my grandmother found several empty Coke cans behind the old sofa, which had been up against one of the walls for quite some time. There were also empty bags of chips, candy wrappers, and fruit cores and peels, all of which were taken from the garage. The sofa was high enough for someone to lay underneath. He had been inside our house, inside our garage. We've moved now, as have my aunts. My grandparents still live there. We're about a 3-minute drive from them, but we still don't know who he was, how he got in, and, most importantly, how long had he been inside our home. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.